This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Brandon Ayuik just requested a trade from the San Francisco 49ers, which has led a lot of people to speculate, could Brandon Ayuik be on his way to the Cleveland Browns? Now, again, there's no real rumor that Brandon Ayuik is coming or that the Browns are even interested in him. So it's important to keep that in perspective while we have this conversation. But I do think Brandon Ayuik, this situation is a interesting one to talk about because you get to hit on more things than just trading for Brandon Ayuik and what that would mean for the Cleveland Browns. So what I want to do is talk about the potential of this trade, the hurdles in the way of this trade, and really hit some angles on this that I don't think a lot of people have considered because we're kind of viewing it from the lens of being fans of the Cleveland Browns. And what I mean by that is when you are a fan of a team, you just want your team to get better, right? You don't really concern yourself with what the cost is. You just want to get better. You want to maximize the season ahead of you, even if your team is not trying to do that. Even if your team is trying to do that, you're always hell-bent on trying to maximize the season as a fan, right? That's why so many people want the Browns to make a move for Justin Simmons, or last year it was Ezekiel Elliott. Now we're talking about Brandon Ayuik. When you're a fan, you want the team to kind of throw caution to the wind and add guys. And I'm not saying that's a bad instinct. I think that's a normal, good instinct for fans to want. You should want your team to do everything possible to get better. And it's good to put pressure on the team as fans to push the team to do everything possible to win. Because no, they might not do everything you want them to do, but if you keep a constant amount of pressure on them, then they never get complacent, right? Or they're less likely to get complacent. So I'm not criticizing that energy coming from the fan base. You should want the team to do everything possible to get better. There's reasons why they won't do it ultimately, and when those come out, it's fair to be understanding of it. But putting that pressure on the team is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But when it comes to Brandon Ayuik, it's more than just getting better. There's some serious questions I think need to be asked that nobody has bothered to ask yet about Brandon Ayuik in this whole situation with the San Francisco 49ers. The first question I think we really have to ask and find a satisfying answer to is simple. If the 49ers, who drafted and developed Brandon Ayuik, do not want to pay him more than $26 million, why should the Browns want to trade Amari Cooper and draft compensation to get him? Serious question. A lot of people don't have a great answer for that question. But the first thing you got to answer for a free agent, for anybody that you want to trade for, is the question of why they are available in the first place. Why doesn't the team that has so much access to that player want to keep that player? Usually you want to keep the players that are good with you. There's a reason why teams are always hesitant to trade with good organizations, because they know what they're doing. We assume that the 49ers, they're not dysfunctional. They know what they're doing. So why would the 49ers be comfortable with bringing in Amari Cooper at similar money and getting a draft pick, but not just keeping Brandon Ayuik? Why don't they want to pay Brandon Ayuik the extra $4 million? Like, serious question. What is it to them that makes them not want to do it? They've drawn a pretty hard line on this thing. You can say maybe it's because the 49ers don't value the wide receiver position. They did the same thing with Deebo Samuel, right? Where they didn't want to pay Deebo, but eventually they gave Deebo a new contract Will this be the same thing for Brandon Ayuk? It doesn't seem like we're heading into that territory. It seems like this is going to be standoffish and head into the franchise tag territory after this season. There's something there that makes them not feel comfortable with giving Brandon Ayuk a long-term deal at $30 million a year, which is interesting. Because if you talk to people around the league, they would value Brandon Ayuk at about $30 million at 25 years old. So what is the friction? This is a good organization. And when you make a move like this, when do you say, I will pay that guy the money you don't want to pay him? What you're also saying is, I feel like I'm smarter than the team that is trading you. And sometimes that's true. Right? You trade with the team. This happened to the Browns back in the day a lot, where the Browns weren't the smarter team. So teams would just rob us left and right. But this is not the 2000 Browns that are getting rid of Brandon Ayuk. This is the 49ers, one of the best teams in the NFC, one of the best ran teams in the NFC. And while I think the Browns front office is good, very good, I don't think they're outsmarting the San Francisco 49ers on a player that the San Francisco 49ers drafted and developed. So why is he available? I think that part is so much more suspicious than people give it credit for. Like, I think we should be way more skeptical about this whole thing based on that. Again, if this were the Carolina Panthers wanting to trade Brandon Ayuk, okay. They're not a good franchise. We can just move on and think that they're making a mistake or that they're being cheap or something like that. With the Bengals and T. Higgins, we know that the Bengals don't got it like that, right? So that's why the Bengals can't keep T. Higgins. They ain't got cash like other teams do. That's not the case with the San Francisco 49ers. They got money. They do the same stuff the Browns do and that the Eagles do. So it's not that. It's not money. If you look at the 49ers contracts, I mean, Debo has a cap hit of 28 this year, but most of that is restructuring. His base salary is only $20 million, and you can get out of that contract next year if you really wanted to. And that goes with pretty much everybody else on the 49ers roster. Like, it wouldn't be easy to get out, but a lot of their long-term deals, Bosa, Fred Warner, Javon Hargraves, Christian McCaffrey, they all have potential outs at 2026. Some of them more painful than others. You look at George Kittle, he's making peanuts, like $14 million, something like that. No, 12, my bad. $12 million is what George Kittle is making. You're not spending that much money on the wide receivers. You're spending a lot of money on like Trent Williams, but you got money. You got $30 million in cap space right now to do the deal. You have cap space going forward. The money is not the issue as far as the 49ers' ability to spend it. They have it from a cap standpoint. They have it from a cash standpoint. So why they don't want to give them the extra $4 million? Is there something they know about Brandon Ayuk that we don't? That would scare me. Honestly, it's a red flag to me with this whole Brandon Ayuk situation is they really don't want to do it. And it doesn't make any sense. He's 25 years old. I'm talking about Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk is 25 years old. He's had a career year last year. He's seen as one of the best route runners in football. You have one wide receiver who's a zone killer. He is now a press man killer. So the fit's great there on the wide receiver side. You have a young quarterback who you don't have to pay yet. It makes no sense that a team in the position of the San Francisco 49ers would not want to keep Brandon Ayuk unless there is something there. Now, I don't know if they're ultimately willing to trade Brandon Ayuk. Maybe they just don't value Brandon Ayuk at $30 million, and that's just the issue. But again, if they don't value Brandon Ayuk at $30 million, should we? Like, are we missing something? You can just write it off as the 49ers don't like paying wide receivers, but that doesn't explain it enough for me. The 49ers are too good of an organization to let a player as good as Brandon Ayuk, or as good as everybody says Brandon Ayuk is, go over $4 million extra a year. That's not something that a good organization would do unless there is something that pops up there. And again, in order to make the trade for Brandon Ayuk, you have to believe that the Browns are going to outsmart the 49ers on a player that they developed. Not saying it's impossible for the Browns to outsmart the 49ers, but the 49ers have the obvious advantage. They developed and drafted Brandon Ayuk. They've had him in the building for the last 4 years. There's something there that doesn't make them want to give him the extra $4 million, and I just don't get it. And I think that's a red flag. I think that's something that we should be very cautious about because he shouldn't be available. This doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to have people in the comment section with their crackpot conspiracy theories all of a sudden turning Brandon Ayuk into some kind of diva. There's nothing that indicates that he is some kind of head case or issue in the locker room. I know he got put in a doghouse in 2021 for whatever reason. But again, I'm not going to go there with it, right? I think this is about football, not about some bullshit made up locker room personality conflict that people with less information than anybody are trying to imply here, right? Like, let's keep this about football. But there is something. Let's keep this about football. And I'm saying there's something there with the football that obviously makes the 49ers not value Brandon Ayuk. To me, I think it's one of two things. Either they think Brandon Ayuk is overrated as a football player and as a wide receiver, and he's not worth $30 million. Or either they think wide receivers right now as an entire entity are just completely overrated and not worth $30 million a year, no matter who they are. Either way, we'd be wise to pay attention to that. I've been pounding this drum for a while, but I think we really got to start asking ourselves, are wide receivers really worth $30 million a year? Like, when did we make the determination that running backs were worth $10 million a year, but wide receivers are worth $30 million a year, when you can have similar arguments about both positions? If you think the running back is not valuable because you can get a good offensive line and put any running back in there, you could say the same thing with a wide receiver and a quarterback. Well, you could put any wide receiver there if you have a great quarterback. Hell, you could do the same thing with the offensive line. If you have an offensive line that can give you a lot of time to protect, then you can give your wide receivers extra time, and you can win with wide receivers that aren't as good as long as you have a good offensive line because they have more time to win their routes and you can't cover somebody forever. Yeah, I don't know how wide receivers snuck through and got $30 million to $35 million. I'm hard pressed to find an example of a $30 million wide receiver that transformed a team into a Super Bowl contender. Like, you can say all you want about Miami, and they got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and they're spending $60 million a year at wide receiver. They're still unserious. They still, only amounted to a very forgettable playoff game against Kansas City. And the only reason we remember that playoff game is because Pat Mahomes' helmet broke. Like, that's ultimately what Miami has amounted to in the last two seasons. A lot of fun during the regular season, but as far as the playoffs go, they're not a serious threat. And that's the best example. Outside like Philadelphia, maybe. But a lot of the strength of Philly wasn't about their wide receivers, as good as they are in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. It's about the defense. And once that defense went, it didn't matter that you had A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. They go stunk last year. Then you have the Vikings, who have had a good wide receiver since like 2015, or at least 2018. They haven't been serious ever. Ever. Devontae Adams got traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. Was this big move. Has that changed the fortune of the Las Vegas Raiders? As good as Devontae Adams is? I think wide receivers are overrated right now. Like, I don't think wide receivers are worth $30 million a year. I don't think they provide $30 million of impact. And maybe that's what the 49ers are thinking. We're not paying anybody $30 million to play wide receiver. It's ridiculous. Because it is. Which, again, brings me back to the point. If the 49ers think it's ridiculous to pay a wide receiver $30 million because they don't think wide receivers can provide $30 million of impact, that's something the Browns should consider. I mean, you're already paying $230 over $5 for Deshaun Watson. You expect him to elevate wide receiver play. Why would there be a need to put a $30 million wide receiver around Deshaun Watson? Especially if you're confident and he's going to come back and play well, which it seems like the Browns are. You already brought in Jerry Jeudy. You already have Amari Cooper under contract. Why trade Amari Cooper to get younger for Brandon Ayuk to spend more money when you expect that Deshaun Watson from here on out should be somebody who can elevate the wide receiver position? Like, you should be able to get away with less at the wide receiver position because you expect Deshaun Watson from here on out to be healthy and play well. That's what the contract says. That's what the team says. So why would you trade for Brandon Ayuk? Again, maybe the Browns aren't thinking about this long term, and maybe they just want to make a big splash and get better immediately and get younger. And maybe they think that having Brandon Ayuk on the team, while it might not make sense from a distribution of resources sense, it makes sense on a wins and loss level. Maybe they feel like that's the case. I don't know. I have more questions about the Brandon Ayuk trade. And I'm a Brandon Ayuk fan. I think Brandon Ayuk's a good player. But I think it should cause us a pause when the 49ers are so unwilling to give Brandon Ayuk the money that people think he should get in the market. And again, I'll reiterate this one more time. The 49ers aren't like the Bengals, right? When the Bengals refuse to pay somebody, it's because they broke or can't afford it. No harm to Bengal fans. It's just, that's the reality. Money is more of a reality and an inhibitor for the Cincinnati Bengals than it is for the San Francisco 49ers. So there's a question there. If money's not stopping them from doing it, what is? That's my one thing about Brandon Ayuk. I think he's a great route runner. I think if he was traded here, he would be an immediate upgrade over Amari Cooper. I don't know if he's Amari Cooper plus a draft pick level upgrade, but maybe you feel like down the line, right, over 3 or 4 years with Brandon Ayuk, that pays itself out. And I don't think that's ridiculous to think that it could pay itself back. But if you want the Browns to trade for Brandon Ayuk, or you don't want the Browns to trade for Brandon Ayuk, if you're just a Browns fan interested in this conversation, there's a few questions you have to answer. One, how much do you value wide receivers? How much money do you think a wide receiver should make? Like, how much money do you think it makes sense in this modern cap for a wide receiver to make? Do you think 30 million plus makes sense? Should you have a 30 million plus wide receiver? You've done well without one. The second question is simple. If Brandon Ayuk is this great and this good and as good as everybody tells you he is, and he might be, why don't the 49ers want to keep him? And is our reason for wanting Brandon Ayuk stronger than the reason for the 49ers to want to get rid of Ayuk? And basically, you have to ask yourself this question. Do you think the Browns are so good that they can outsmart the 49ers on a player they developed? I don't know. I got all kind of faith in Andrew Berry. I think Andrew Berry is one of the best GMs in the NFL, but I also think the same thing of what's going on in San Francisco. They're a great franchise. They know what they're doing, especially in that offense. If they don't want to give them 30, I think we should pump the brakes and ask ourselves these questions. That's all I got for you right now. I'm not saying that I would be upset if the Browns traded for Brandon Ayuk. I would be happy if the Browns traded for Brandon Ayuk, but I also would be fine and happy if the Browns didn't even consider it for those reasons I listed in this video. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.